Welcome to the Full Tracy Money Audio Commentary. This is Owen Tracy recording. It's 2:21 p.m. That is Central Time. Today is February 21st, and today being Friday, it's the big picture long-term audio and video for the various different asset classes. Well, we certainly had more risk off on the market today. We've had significant declines right across equity markets. Bitcoin's down nearly $3,000. Then bonds are rallying. So bonds are doing what they're supposed to do when there's off environment. Also, having been down on consecutive days, the dollar was a little bit steadier in here today. Gold is pretty much unchanged. Oil prices are down $2. So there's a lot going on. And I think we can think about it in terms of maybe two or three big themes. The first is that open source technological innovation is not capitalistic. And that's a problem if you're competing with companies that have no real profit motivation and are plowing money into innovation. So that's really a challenge for a company like OpenAI when you have a company in China like DeepSeek, which has announced innovations which several of the big tech CEOs have rubbished. And then DeepSeek turns around today and says, you know what? We're just going to open source everything. We're going to show you exactly what our work was. So that's obviously problematic. If you have companies like Meta, which has embraced open source, and you have DeepSeek, which is embracing open source, competing against companies like Microsoft and OpenAI, which want to make a product that they can sell out of what was originally open source, and now they are putting on the garden. Then you have Anthropic is trying to do the same thing, and these are obviously conflicting business models. But from the perspective of a user, would you prefer to use something that's free, that does the same job as something you're expected to pay $200 a month for? And I think the answer is pretty obvious. And I think let's just go back and think about what happened in the early 2000s. Google IPO'd, and Google had basically rubbished the business models of companies like AOL and Netscape. Back in the late 1990s, you were paying for a CD-ROM, and you had to go off and buy the internet. It came on a disk, and you had to install your browser and pay for your browser. And then Google launched Chrome, and you basically didn't have to pay for it. You then subsequently, a few years later, got a free email address. You used to have to pay for your email address. So when we think about artificial intelligence, you have competing business models evolving now, and that is going straight up against the profit motivation. So that's a challenge. Now, something that I think is also important is that the Trump administration is unilaterally negotiating with Russia, and they're not brooking any protest. So on the one hand, you have Pete Hegseth in a NATO meeting basically saying that they're going to give Russia whatever they want. Turning around the next day, then you have J.D. Vance saying they're not going to. It's really just that these are probably the things that Russia will want. They're not necessarily going to get them. And that if they don't negotiate in good faith, then they'll escalate the war. Then he comes out and harangues the European defense community, governmental community, and tells them that they don't know what they're doing. And they don't know how to run their countries, and they don't know how to govern. And obviously, that was something that was very problematic from a European perspective. Then we have the broad question about what does it all mean? And just because the USA is in negotiations with Russia doesn't mean that Russia is going to play ball. And that's obviously something that's important to consider as well. Then we have the entire question around the bond markets. And the bond market rallied quite impressively today. So we have this whole question around whether there's going to be an inflationary outcome or a deflationary outcome. And I think that it's going to be mixed. There are going to be inflationary considerations. There are going to be deflationary or disinflationary considerations. But something that I think is important to emphasize is that the US government is talking about some pretty extraordinary measures to try and depress yields and to try and get the national debt under control. And none of them include raising taxes. So that's an important consideration. That if they're not going to raise taxes, it means that they've got to cut spending. Not only do they have to cut spending, but that they have to embrace pretty extraordinary measures as well. So we're in a rather volatile environment. Then we have simultaneously on the technology front, China turning around for the first time in 5 years and embracing the technology